The sun shone brightly through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the downtown office. Robert Patel leaned back in his leather chair and looked out at the city skyline. 10 years ago, he had been just another struggling entrepreneur with big dreams and empty pockets. Now, at 35, he was the owner of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country. His assistant knocked on the door, interrupting his thoughts. "Mr. Patel, the conference call with the investors is in 5 minutes." Robert nodded and straightened his tie. Success had come at a price. His schedule was always packed, leaving little room for anything else. The relationships he once had were now distant memories, sacrificed on the altar of ambition. As he prepared for the call, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from his old college friend, Raj. "Hey man, the reunion is this weekend. You coming this time? You've missed the last 3. Robert sighed. He had been avoiding these gatherings for years. Too many memories, too many faces from the past he wasn't ready to confront. Especially one face. Priya. Just thinking about her name brought back a flood of emotions. They had been college sweethearts, together for nearly 4 years before life pulled them in different directions. She wanted stability, a family. He wanted to chase his dreams, build something big. They couldn't find middle ground, and eventually, the relationship crumbled under the weight of their different paths. The breakup had been messy, with words said that couldn't be taken back. Robert had thrown himself into his work afterward, using the pain as fuel to drive his ambition. And it had worked. He had built an empire. But sometimes, in quiet moments like this, he wondered if it had been worth it. "Mr. Patel? The investors are waiting," his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "I'll be right there," he replied, pushing thoughts of Priya aside. Later that evening, as Robert sat alone in his penthouse apartment, the message from Raj kept coming back to him. Maybe it was time to face the past. He was a different person now, successful, confident. The wounds from back then had surely healed. He picked up his phone and typed a response, "I'll be there." The weekend arrived quicker than Robert expected. He found himself driving back to his hometown, a place he hadn't visited in years. The familiar streets brought back memories of simpler times, before the money, before the success, when happiness was measured in laughter shared with friends and quiet evenings with Priya. The reunion was being held at a local hotel, transformed for the occasion with banners displaying their graduation year. As Robert walked in, heads turned. Word of his success had spread, and old classmates approached him with congratulations and questions about his company. "There he is. The big shot." Raj's booming voice cut through the crowd. His old friend embraced him warmly. "I almost didn't believe you'd show up." "Well, I thought it was time," Robert said with a smile. "A lot of people will be surprised to see you," Raj said, giving him a meaningful look. "Including her." Robert's heart skipped a beat. "Is she here?" Raj nodded. "She comes every year. She's different now. Life's been quite a journey for her too." Before Robert could ask more, they were interrupted by other classmates eager to catch up. The evening progressed with reminiscing and updates on life events. Robert found himself relaxing, enjoying the connections to his past that he had been avoiding for so long. Then, across the room, he saw her. Priya stood near the bar, talking with a few former classmates. She looked almost the same as he remembered, the same warm smile that had once been his comfort, the same graceful posture. Her hair was shorter now, and there was a new confidence in the way she carried herself. Robert felt rooted to the spot. All the speeches he had delivered to important clients, all the negotiations with tough investors, none of it had prepared him for this moment. Raj nudged him. "Go talk to her." "I don't know what to say," Robert admitted. "Start with hello. The rest will follow." Taking a deep breath, Robert made his way across the room. As he approached, Priya looked up, and their eyes met. Recognition, surprise, and something else he couldn't quite read flashed across her face. "Hello, Priya," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Robert," she replied. "I heard you might be here this year." The initial exchange was awkward, filled with small talk about weather and the venue. But gradually, as they moved to a quieter corner of the room, the conversation began to flow more naturally. "Your company is doing well," she said. "I see your name in the business news quite often." "It's been a good few years," he acknowledged. "What about you? What have you been up to?" A subtle change came over her expression. "I became a teacher, like I always wanted. I'm at the elementary school across town." "That's great," Robert said sincerely. "You always had a way with kids." Priya looked down at her drink, then back up at him with an intensity that caught him off guard. "There's something you should know, Robert. I've been thinking about whether to tell you this all evening." The serious tone of her voice made his stomach tighten. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "After we broke up, I found out I was pregnant." The world seemed to stop around him. The chatter of the reunion faded into the background as he processed her words. "Pregnant," he repeated, his voice barely audible. Priya nodded. "With twins. A boy and a girl." Robert gripped the edge of the nearby table to steady himself. I have children." "Yes," she said quietly. "They're 9 years old now." 9 years. Nearly a decade he had missed of their lives. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, a storm of emotions building inside him. "I tried, Robert. In those first few months, I called you so many times. You never answered. Then I heard you had moved away, started your company. You were building the life you always wanted. Without us." The accusation in her last words stung because there was truth in them. He had deliberately cut ties with everyone from his past, including her, as he pursued his ambitions. "I want to meet them," he said, the words coming out before he could even think about them. Priya studied his face for a long moment, as if weighing his sincerity. Finally, she nodded. "They're actually here in town. With my parents. I'm picking them up tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow," Robert repeated, feeling both terrified and impatient at the thought of waiting even one more day. "Come by my parents' house at 10, she said, writing an address on a napkin and handing it to him. "There's a lot we need to talk about." As she walked away to rejoin her friends, Robert stood frozen, the napkin clutched in his hand. Children. He had children. Twins who had been growing up without him, who didn't even know he existed. The realization of all he had missed, first steps, first words, birthdays, everyday moments, washed over him with crushing force. His empire of wealth and success suddenly seemed hollow compared to the treasure he hadn't known he possessed. Tomorrow, he would meet his children for the first time. And nothing in his life would ever be the same again. Robert barely slept that night. He tossed and turned in his hotel room, his mind racing with thoughts of the children he never knew existed. What did they look like? What were their names? Would they hate him for not being there all these years? By the time morning came, he had showered and changed 3 times, unsure of what to wear for such a momentous occasion. In the end, he settled on a simple blue button-down shirt and jeans, not the expensive suit he usually wore to business meetings. Today wasn't about impressing investors, it was about meeting his flesh and blood. He arrived at Priya's parents' house 15 minutes early, then sat in his car, gathering his courage. The house looked the same as he remembered from their college days, a modest 2-story home with a well-tended garden. Priya's mother had always loved her flowers. At exactly 10 o'clock, he walked up to the front door and rang the bell, his heart hammering in his chest. Footsteps approached, and then the door swung open. It was Priya, looking more casual than she had at the reunion, dressed in a simple yellow sundress. "You came," she said, a hint of surprise in her voice. "Did you think I wouldn't?" he asked. She shrugged slightly. "I wasn't sure. Come in." The house smelled of spices and freshly baked bread, bringing back memories of weekend dinners with Priya's family during their college years. Her parents had always welcomed him warmly then. He wondered what they thought of him now. "My parents took the twins to the park," Priya explained, leading him to the living room. "I wanted us to talk first." They sat across from each other, an awkward silence settling between them. "What are their names?" Robert finally asked. A small smile touched Priya's lips. "Arjun and Anaya." "Beautiful names," he said softly. Are they good kids?" "The best," Priya replied, her face lighting up with maternal pride. "Arjun is quiet, thoughtful. He loves reading and building things. Anaya is more outgoing, always singing or dancing. They're both doing well in school." Robert drank in every detail, trying to form a picture of his children in his mind. "Do they know about me?" Priya's expression grew more serious. "They know their father lives far away and works very hard. They know he doesn't know about them yet, but that it wasn't because he didn't want them." Relief washed over him. At least they hadn't been told he had abandoned them. "Thank you for that. I never wanted to poison them against you, Robert. That wouldn't have been fair to anyone, especially the twins." She hesitated. "But I need to know what your intentions are now. You can't just walk into their lives and then disappear when things get complicated or when work calls." Her words stung, but he understood her concern. "I know I haven't given you reason to believe me, but I want to be part of their lives, Priya. Completely. I'll make whatever changes necessary." She studied him, searching for sincerity. "They'll be back soon. We should talk about how to approach this. It's going to be overwhelming for them." They spent the next half hour discussing how to introduce Robert to the twins. They decided on a simple approach. He was an old friend of their mother's who wanted to get to know them. "We can tell them the full truth gradually," Priya suggested. "They're smart kids. They'll have questions." "I'll answer everything honestly," Robert promised. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made them both look toward the window. "They're here," Priya said, standing up. "Are you ready?" Robert stood as well, smoothing down his shirt nervously. "As ready as I'll ever be." The front door opened, and excited children's voices filled the hallway. Robert held his breath as footsteps approached the living room. And then they were there. 2 children bounded into the room, followed by Priya's parents. The moment Robert saw them, something shifted inside him. The boy, Arjun, had his exact jawline and the same serious set to his eyes. The girl, Anaya, had his smile and the dimple on her left cheek that was identical to his own. They were undeniably his. The twins noticed him and stopped, suddenly shy in the presence of a stranger. "Arjun, Anaya," Priya said gently, "this is Mr. Patel. He's an old friend of mine from college." "Hello," Robert managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "Hi," they replied in unison, the synchronization making Robert smile despite his nervousness. Priya's parents stood in the doorway, their expressions a mix of wariness and curiosity. Her father gave Robert a small nod, not warm, but not hostile either. "Mr. Patel is going to have lunch with us," Priya told the twins. "He's visiting town and wanted to meet you both." "Why?" Arjun asked directly, his gaze analytical in a way that reminded Robert of himself. Robert knelt down to be at eye level with the children. "Because your mom has told me what amazing kids you are. And she's right. It's very nice to meet you both." Anaya, bolder than her brother, stepped forward. "Do you like pizza? We're having pizza for lunch." "I love pizza," Robert said with a smile. What's your favorite kind? Cheese, Anaya declared. Pepperoni, Arjun said at the same time. The simple exchange broke the ice, and soon the twins were chattering away, showing Robert their toys and books while lunch was being prepared. He listened intently to every word, noting how Arjun's eyebrows furrowed when he concentrated, just like Robert's did, and how Anaya talked with her hands, a habit Robert had himself. During lunch, he caught Priya watching him interact with the twins, a cautious hope in her eyes. Her parents were more reserved, occasionally joining the conversation but mostly observing. As the meal ended, Anaya suddenly asked, "Will you come back again, Mr. Patel?" The question hung in the air. Robert looked at Priya, who gave a small nod. "I'd like that very much," he told Anaya. "If it's okay with your mom." "Can he, Mom?" Arjun asked, surprising everyone with his enthusiasm. Priya smiled gently. "Yes, Mr. Patel can visit again." Later, as Robert prepared to leave, Priya walked him to his car. "They liked you," she said quietly. "They're incredible," Robert replied, his voice full of wonder. "I missed so much, Priya." "You're here now," she said, though there was still caution in her tone. "What happens next is up to you." As he drove away, Robert's mind was already racing with plans. He needed to figure out how to restructure his life, how to be present for his children while still managing his company. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, something mattered more to him than business success. His children needed a father. And he was determined to become one worthy of them. The next few weeks brought changes to Robert's life that would have seemed unimaginable before. He extended his stay in his hometown, renting a small house nearby instead of returning to his penthouse in the city. His assistant was shocked when he announced he would be working remotely for the foreseeable future. "But sir, the Johnson merger," she had protested over the phone. "Can be handled by the team," Robert finished firmly. "I have confidence in them. And I'll be available for video conferences when absolutely necessary." For the first time in his career, Robert was delegating major decisions to his management team. It felt strange, but also freeing in a way he hadn't expected. He began spending time with the twins a few afternoons each week. Priya was cautious but supportive, allowing him to take them to the park or for ice cream while she graded papers or ran errands. They still hadn't told the children who he really was, but with each meeting, their connection grew stronger. "Mr. Patel, watch this." Anaya called out one afternoon at the playground, swinging herself upside down on the monkey bars. "Be careful," he called back, his heart in his throat as she dangled precariously. Parental concern, he discovered, came naturally to him, despite his lack of experience. Arjun, meanwhile, had taken to showing Robert his science projects. "I'm building a solar system model," he explained during one visit, carefully painting a small styrofoam ball to represent Earth. "Did you like science when you were little?" "I did," Robert told him. "I was always taking things apart to see how they worked. Drove my parents crazy." "Me too." Arjun's eyes lit up. "Mom says I'm too curious sometimes." These small moments of connection meant everything to Robert. He found himself thinking less about stock prices and more about whether Anaya would win her dance competition or if Arjun would finish his model in time for the science fair. One evening, after he had dropped the twins off following a trip to the movies, Priya invited him in for a cup of tea. "They're falling asleep on their feet," she said with a smile, nodding toward the stairs where the twins had trudged up to bed. That adventure movie really wore them out. They sat at the kitchen table, a comfortable silence between them that would have been unthinkable a month ago. "You're good with them," Priya said finally. "Better than I expected, to be honest." "They make it easy," Robert replied. "They're amazing kids, Priya. You've done an incredible job raising them." She looked down at her tea. "It hasn't always been easy. There were times I was working 2 jobs to make ends meet while finishing my teaching degree. My parents helped a lot. The thought of her struggling while he was amassing his fortune made shame wash over him. I wish I had known. I would have. That's in the past, she interrupted gently. What matters is now. And speaking of now, I think it's time we told them the truth. Robert's heart raced. Are you sure? Priya nodded. They keep asking questions about you. Why you're suddenly around so much. Why you seem to care about them so quickly. They're picking up on things, Robert. Kids are perceptive. How do you think they'll take it? He asked, anxiety creeping into his voice. Honestly? I don't know. They might be confused, angry even. Or they might be thrilled. We need to be prepared for anything. She looked at him seriously. Are you ready for this? Because once we tell them, there's no going back. You'll be their father, for better or worse. Forever. I've never been more ready for anything in my life, Robert said without hesitation. They decided to tell the twins that weekend, during a picnic at the local park. It was a beautiful spring day, the kind that seemed made for new beginnings. After they had eaten, while the twins were finishing their juice boxes, Priya caught Robert's eye and nodded slightly. Arjun, Anaya, she began, Mr. Patel and I have something important to tell you. The twins looked up curiously. Anaya's legs swung back and forth from the picnic bench while Arjun's brow furrowed in that way that was so like Robert's. You know how we've talked about your dad before? Priya continued. About how he lives far away and hasn't met you yet? They nodded, their eyes now moving between their mother and Robert with growing understanding. Well, Priya said gently, Mr. Patel is actually your dad. There was a moment of complete silence. Robert held his breath, watching their faces for any reaction. I knew it. Anaya suddenly exclaimed, jumping up from the bench. I told Arjun you looked like the man in Mom's old pictures. Arjun remained silent, his expression unreadable. Is that true? He finally asked, looking directly at Robert. You're really our dad? Robert nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Yes, I am. And I'm so sorry I haven't been here until now. I didn't know about you, but if I had. His voice broke slightly. If I had known, I would have been here from the beginning. Why didn't you know about us? Arjun pressed, always the analytical one. Robert and Priya exchanged glances. They had agreed to keep the explanation simple but honest. Your mom and I lost touch before she found out she was going to have you, Robert explained. That was my fault. I moved away and changed my phone number because. He paused, trying to find the right words. Because I was focused on building my company and not on the people who mattered. Do we matter now? Arjun asked quietly. Robert moved to kneel in front of him, looking his son directly in the eyes. You and your sister matter more to me than anything in the world. And I promise you, Arjun, I will never disappear from your lives again. Anaya, always quicker to express her emotions, threw her arms around Robert's neck. Does this mean we can call you Dad now instead of Mr. Patel? Robert looked at Priya, who nodded with tears in her eyes. Yes, he told Anaya, his voice thick with emotion. I would like that very much. Arjun still seemed hesitant, but he offered a small smile. I built a robot last month. Do you want to see it when we get home? It was a small olive branch, but to Robert, it meant everything. I'd love to see it, he said. As they packed up the picnic, Robert caught Priya watching him with the twins. There was new warmth in her eyes, a tentative trust beginning to form. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, there were years of absence to make up for, relationships to build, trust to earn. But for the first time in a very long time, Robert felt he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Word traveled fast in the small town. Within days of the twins learning the truth about Robert, it seemed everyone knew that the local success story had returned not just for a visit, but because he had children he never knew about. Whispers followed them in the grocery store. Parents at the school gave curious glances when Robert joined Priya for the twins' school play. Ignore them, Priya advised when she noticed Robert's discomfort with the attention. They'll find something else to talk about soon enough. But Robert wasn't just dealing with local gossip. His extended absence from the company headquarters was causing ripples in the business world as well. Speculation about his sudden departure from the city filled financial news sites. Some reports suggested health problems, others hinted at trouble within the company. One morning, as Robert sat at the kitchen table in his rented house reviewing quarterly reports, his phone rang. It was David, his chief financial officer. "Robert, we need you back here," David said without preamble. "The board is getting nervous. The Johnson merger is at a critical stage, and the investors want to hear from you directly, not your representatives." Robert sighed. He had known this call would come eventually. "David, I told you. I'm handling things remotely for now." "For how long?" "It's been almost 2 months already." There was a pause. "Look, whatever personal matter you're dealing with, I'm sure it's important. But this company is your life's work. Are you really willing to risk it all?" The question hung in the air. Just months ago, Robert would have been on the first flight back without hesitation. The company had always come first. But now? "I'll think about it," he finally replied. "Let me get back to you tomorrow." After hanging up, Robert sat in silence, weighing his options. He had responsibilities to his employees, his investors. Thousands of people depended on the company's success for their livelihoods. But he also had responsibilities now to Arjun and Anaya. That afternoon, he picked up the twins from school as planned. They had settled into a routine. Tuesdays and Thursdays were "dad days," as Anaya called them. "Can we get ice cream?" Anaya asked as they walked toward his car. "Only if you finished all your lunch today," Robert replied, falling easily into the parental role that still sometimes surprised him. "I did. Arjun gave me his apple, though." Robert glanced at his son. "Not hungry today?" Arjun shrugged. "I was saving room. I knew she'd want ice cream." The simple comment revealed so much about their relationship, how well they understood each other, how Arjun quietly looked out for his more impulsive sister. Robert felt a surge of pride mixed with regret for all the years he had missed. At the ice cream shop, while the twins debated between flavors, Robert's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Priya. "Can we talk tonight?" Important. A knot formed in his stomach. Had he done something wrong? Was she rethinking the arrangement? Later, after dropping the twins at their after-school activities, Anaya at dance class, Arjun at chess club, Robert met Priya at a quiet cafe downtown. "Is everything okay?" he asked as soon as he sat down. Priya looked tired but calm. "Yes and no. My parents are moving to Arizona next month. My dad's arthritis is getting worse, and the dry climate should help. Plus, my aunt lives there and can help look after them." "I'm sorry to hear about your father," Robert said sincerely. He had grown to respect Priya's parents over the past weeks, despite their initial coolness toward him. "The issue is," Priya continued, "they've been my support system. They help with the twins when I have late meetings at school, they're there for emergencies." She took a deep breath. "Without them, things will be much harder." Robert immediately saw an opportunity. "I can help more. I can adjust my schedule, be there whenever you need." Priya gave him a searching look. "For how long, Robert? You have a company to run. A life in the city. This was never meant to be permanent, was it?" The question struck at the very dilemma he had been wrestling with all day. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. I never planned for any of this. But being here, with them, with you, it feels right in a way my life hasn't for a long time. A slight blush colored Priya's cheeks at his words. We can't make decisions based on feelings alone. There are practical considerations. Like what? Like the fact that the twins are settled here. Their school, their friends, their activities. And my job, I've worked hard to build my career at this school. She hesitated. And your company. Can you really run it from here indefinitely? Robert thought about David's call, about the board's concerns. Maybe not in its current form, he acknowledged. But companies can adapt. So can people. Their conversation was interrupted by Robert's phone ringing again. It was David once more. Robert silenced it. You should take it, Priya said. It might be important. This is important, Robert countered, gesturing between them. David can wait. Priya smiled slightly. The old Robert would never have said that. The old Robert didn't know what he was missing. For a moment, something flickered in Priya's eyes, a warmth that reminded him of their college days. But she quickly looked away, returning to the practical matters at hand. We need to figure out a new routine with my parents leaving, she said. The twins will need more stability than ever. What if? Robert began, then hesitated, wondering if he was moving too fast. But the idea had been forming in his mind for days now. What if I bought a house here? Not a rental. Something permanent. Priya's eyes widened. You're really considering staying? I am. As he said it, Robert realized it was true. I've missed too much already. I don't want to miss any more. And your company? I built it once. I can rebuild it if necessary. Or restructure it. Open a branch office here. The ideas were coming faster now, possibilities he hadn't allowed himself to consider. The point is, the company can change. The twins need stability. Priya studied him for a long moment. You've changed, Robert. More than I expected. Is that a good thing? Yes, she said softly. I think it is. As they left the cafe, walking side by side in the afternoon sunlight, Robert felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in years. The path forward wasn't simple or easy, but for the first time, he knew what truly mattered. His phone buzzed again in his pocket. This time, instead of ignoring it, he pulled it out and typed a quick message to David, setting up video conference for tomorrow. Have some new ideas for company restructuring. Then he put the phone away and turned his attention back to Priya, to their discussion about the twins' schedule for the coming week. The business world could wait. Right now, he had more important matters to attend to. The next few weeks brought a whirlwind of changes. Robert found a beautiful house just 3 streets away from Priya's place, close enough for the twins to easily travel between homes, but with enough distance to maintain healthy boundaries. The 4-bedroom home had a large backyard perfect for the twins to play in and a dedicated space he could convert into a home office. It's a lovely home, the real estate agent had gushed, but are you sure you want to put in an offer without your wife seeing it? Robert had simply smiled, not bothering to correct her assumption. I'm sure. Meanwhile, his proposal to open a branch office in town had been met with resistance from some board members but enthusiasm from others who saw potential in expanding their operations. After several tense video conferences, a compromise was reached. Robert would split his time between headquarters and the new branch, spending 2 weeks of each month in the city. It's not ideal, he admitted to Priya as they sat on the porch of his soon-to-be new home, watching the twins explore the yard. But it's a start. I'll be here for at least half of every month, and we can see how it goes. Priya nodded thoughtfully. The twins will understand. They're used to accommodating adult schedules. A hint of old pain colored her words. I don't want them to just accommodate me, Robert said. I want to be a real father. Present. Involved. You will be, Priya assured him. We'll make it work. The moving day came quickly. Robert had hired a company to furnish the house, but he took special care with the twins' rooms, consulting them on colors and themes. I want a space theme. Arjun had declared immediately. And I want purple everything, Anaya added. When they finally saw their rooms, their reactions made all the planning worthwhile. Anaya spun around her lavender-walled room, admiring the canopy bed and the dance bar installed along one wall. Arjun stood open-mouthed in his room, taking in the cosmic ceiling where tiny lights had been installed to mimic constellations. This is the coolest room ever, he whispered, his usual reserve melting away. That evening, they had their first dinner in the new house. Robert had arranged for catering, unsure of his cooking abilities, though he promised the twins he would learn. Dad, are you rich? Arjun asked suddenly as they ate. The question caught Robert off guard. He glanced at Priya, who raised an eyebrow, leaving the response to him. I've been fortunate in my business, he said carefully. Why do you ask? Arjun shrugged. Tommy at school said you must be super rich because you bought a house so fast. And because of your fancy car. Robert considered his answer thoughtfully. He didn't want his children growing up with a warped sense of privilege, but he also didn't want to lie. Money makes some things easier, he acknowledged. Like buying this house quickly. But it doesn't make everything better. It doesn't automatically make you happy or loved. He looked at each of the twins. Having you two in my life, that's worth more than any amount of money. Anaya seemed satisfied with this answer, but Arjun remained thoughtful. If you had known about us before, would you have lived with us and Mom? He asked. The question hung in the air. Robert felt Priya tense beside him. I would have wanted to, Robert answered honestly. But sometimes adults make complicated choices. What matters is that I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Later, after the twins had gone to bed, Priya lingered in the living room. You handled that well, she said. The money question. I want to be honest with them, Robert replied. About everything. Priya nodded, then hesitated. Robert, there's something I've been thinking about. When you go back to the city next week, the twins are going to miss you. I'll miss them too. We can video call every day. It's not the same, Priya said softly. Especially for Anaya. She's become so attached already. Robert felt a pang of guilt. What are you suggesting? Maybe they could come stay with you in the city sometimes. During school breaks. See your world too. Robert stared at her in surprise. You'd be comfortable with that? Not entirely, she admitted with a small smile. But they should know all parts of your life. And I trust you with them now. Those words, I trust you, meant more to Robert than any business deal he'd ever closed. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. You know, Priya said finally, I never thought we'd be here. Co-parenting. Actually getting along. Life has a funny way of surprising us, Robert replied. For what it's worth, I'm glad it did. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, Robert felt a flicker of the old connection between them. But there were boundaries now, lines carefully drawn for the sake of the children. They were parents first, former lovers second. As Priya left for the evening, Robert stood on his porch watching her drive away. His life had been turned upside down in the span of a few months, but somehow, it felt more right than it ever had before. Tomorrow he would help Arjun with his science project. The day after, he would attend Anaya's dance recital. And next week, he would return to the city, to the company he had built. But his heart would remain here, with the family he never knew he had. Robert's first 2 weeks back in the city felt strange. His penthouse, once his pride and joy, now seemed cold and impersonal compared to the warmth of his new home with its children's drawings magnetized to the refrigerator and toys occasionally scattered across the living room floor. "You look different," his executive assistant remarked during his first day back at headquarters. "Different how?" Robert asked, sorting through the mountain of paperwork that had accumulated on his desk. She tilted her head, studying him. "Happier, I think. More relaxed." Robert smiled. "I am." The board meeting that afternoon was less pleasant. Several members expressed concerns about the company's direction and Robert's divided attention. "We need assurances that this new arrangement won't affect our bottom line," one board member stated firmly. "The shareholders are already nervous." "I understand your concerns," Robert replied calmly. "But I believe this restructuring will benefit the company in the long run. Sometimes change brings opportunity." Later that evening, as promised, he video-called the twins. Seeing their faces on the screen brought an immediate smile to his own. "Dad! I got an A on my science project," Arjun announced proudly. "And I learned a new dance move," Anaya added, not to be outdone. "Wanna see?" Before Robert could answer, she had backed away from the camera and was executing a twirl that nearly knocked over a lamp. Priya's hand appeared, steadying the lamp just in time. "Careful, tornado," Priya's voice came from off-screen, affectionate but firm. The call lasted nearly an hour, with both twins eager to share everything about their day. When they finally went to brush their teeth, Priya appeared on screen. "How's the city?" she asked. "Busy. Loud. Not as nice as being there," he admitted. "How are they really doing?" Priya's expression softened. "They miss you. Anaya keeps asking how many days until you come back. But they're okay. They understand." "And you?" The question slipped out before he could consider it. A slight pause. "I'm fine, Robert. We all are." After the call ended, Robert found himself restless in his empty penthouse. He wandered to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. His phone buzzed with emails demanding attention, but instead of checking them, he opened his photo gallery and scrolled through pictures of the twins. In just a few months, they had become the center of his world. The 2 weeks in the city passed in a blur of meetings, conference calls, and late nights catching up on work. When the day finally came to return to his new home, Robert felt like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He arrived to find the twins waiting on the front porch, bouncing with excitement. Anaya ran to the car before he had even turned off the engine. "Dad! Dad! You're back," she called, throwing her arms around him as soon as he stepped out. Arjun approached more slowly but with an equally wide smile. "We made you something," he said, pointing to a large banner hung across the porch that read, "Welcome home Dad," in brightly colored letters. The lump in Robert's throat made it hard to speak. "It's perfect," he managed to say. That evening, after a dinner of pizza, the twins' choice, Robert sat with Priya on the back porch while the children played in the yard. "They seem happy," he observed. Priya nodded. "They are. Having you in their lives, it's been good for them." She hesitated. "For all of us, really." There was something in her tone that made Robert look at her more closely. "Priya, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you ever think about what might have been? If we had stayed together back then?" Priya was quiet for a long moment, watching the twins chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. "Sometimes," she finally admitted. "But we were different people then. You were ambitious, driven. I wanted stability, roots. We wanted different things. And now?" Robert asked softly. Their eyes met, and the years between them seemed to dissolve for a moment. "Now? I don't know. We're still figuring this out, aren't we?" Before Robert could respond, Anaya called from the yard. Mom. Dad. Come see the fireflies we caught. They both rose, the moment passing but not forgotten. As they walked toward the children, Priya's hand briefly brushed against his, perhaps by accident, perhaps not. The next morning, as Robert helped prepare breakfast, a call came from David at the company. "We need you back here," David said without preamble. "The Johnson merger is falling apart. They want to speak only with you." Robert glanced at the twins, happily eating pancakes at the kitchen island. "I just got back, David. I can't leave again so soon." "Robert, this is a $50 million deal. Everything we've worked for." The old Robert would have been on the next flight out. But the man he had become paused, weighing what truly mattered. "Let me talk to the children's mother," he said finally. "I'll call you back." When he explained the situation to Priya, he expected resistance. Instead, she surprised him. "Go," she said. "Handle what you need to handle. We'll be here when you get back." "Are you sure?" Priya smiled. "Robert, this is your life too. The company you built. The twins and I don't need you to choose between us and your work. We just need to know we matter." "You do," he said fervently. "More than anything. Then go save your merger. Just don't stay away too long this time." 6 months later, the grounds of Robert's home were filled with laughter and music. Colorful balloons tied to the fence posts swayed in the gentle summer breeze as children ran through sprinklers set up on the lawn. A large banner hung between 2 trees, "Happy Birthday Arjun and Anaya." The twins' 10th birthday party was in full swing. Robert stood by the grill, flipping burgers while chatting with some of the parents. He had come to know many of them over the past months, slowly integrating into the community that had once viewed him as an outsider. "The place looks great," one of the fathers commented, gesturing to the yard that had been transformed into a carnival-like setting with games and a small bounce house. "Thanks," Robert replied. The kids helped plan everything. Across the lawn, Priya was organizing a game of musical chairs, her laughter carrying through the air as she playfully shooed cheating children back into line. She caught Robert watching and smiled, a warm, genuine smile that made his heart skip. So much had changed in the past 6 months. The Johnson merger had been saved, but the crisis had made Robert re-evaluate his company structure once more. He had promoted David to co-CEO, allowing himself to step back from day-to-day operations while maintaining strategic oversight. It meant more time in town with the twins and less emergency trips to the city. Arjun ran up to the grill, slightly out of breath. "Dad, when are the burgers ready? Everyone's getting hungry." 5 more minutes, Robert promised. "How's the party going? Having fun?" "It's the best birthday ever," Arjun declared, his usual reserve replaced by excitement. "Way better than last year when we just went to the movies." As Arjun darted off again, Robert felt a surge of pride and gratitude. They had come so far since that first awkward meeting at Priya's parents' house. Now the twins moved comfortably between their mother's home and his, their lives enriched rather than complicated by the arrangement. Later, after the cake had been cut and presents opened, most of the guests began to leave. As the party wound down, Robert found Priya in the kitchen, storing leftover food in containers. "That was quite a success," he said, reaching for another container to help. "The twins loved it," Priya agreed. "Although I think you've set a dangerous precedent. They'll expect this level of celebration every year now." "I don't mind," Robert said with a smile. "I have a lot of birthdays to make up for." They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Through the window, they could see the twins showing their new toys to their grandparents, who had flown in from Arizona for the occasion. "They're flying back tomorrow?" Robert asked, nodding toward Priya's parents. "Yes, unfortunately. But they're talking about moving back, actually. Dad's arthritis isn't any better in Arizona, and they miss the kids. She hesitated. And I think they've finally warmed up to you. Only took half a year, Robert chuckled. They were protective. Can you blame them? Not at all. As they finished cleaning up, Anaya bounded into the kitchen. Mom, Dad, can we have a sleepover? Can all of us stay here tonight? Please. Robert and Priya exchanged glances. Grandma and Grandpa are at my house, sweetie, Priya explained. They can stay here too. There's lots of room. Please. It's our birthday. It was hard to resist those pleading eyes, his eyes, Robert realized with a start. He looked to Priya, leaving the decision to her. I suppose we could, she said slowly. If your dad doesn't mind. I'd love it, Robert said, perhaps too quickly. That night, after the twins had finally gone to bed, exhausted but happy, and Priya's parents had retired to the guest room, Robert and Priya found themselves alone on the back porch. The summer night was warm, the sky clear with stars twinkling overhead. Remember when we used to stargaze in college? Priya asked softly. On the roof of your dorm building. You knew all the constellations, Robert recalled. I was always impressed. And you always talked about the future. The company you would build someday. Robert smiled at the memory. I had it all planned out. Every step. And now? Now I know better than to think I can plan everything. He turned to look at her. Some of the best things in life are the ones we don't see coming. Priya met his gaze, her expression soft in the dim porch light. Like finding out you have 10-year-old twins? Exactly like that. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history and present connection hanging between them. Priya, Robert began hesitantly, these past months, working together for the twins, getting to know you again, it's made me realize something. She waited, her eyes never leaving his. I never stopped loving you, he said simply. I tried. I dated other women. I threw myself into work. But no one ever measured up to you. Priya took a deep breath. Robert. I'm not asking for anything, he added quickly. I respect the boundaries we've set. The twins come first. Always. I just wanted you to know. To his surprise, Priya reached out and took his hand. It's not going to be easy, she said softly. We're different people now. We have baggage, history. Is that a yes? Robert asked, hardly daring to hope. A smile spread across Priya's face. It's a, let's see where this goes. Slowly. Very slowly. Robert squeezed her hand gently. I can do slowly. From inside the house came the sound of a door opening, followed by small footsteps. Moments later, Anaya appeared at the porch door in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. I had a bad dream, she mumbled. Robert and Priya exchanged glances, their personal moment set aside as they shifted seamlessly back into parent mode. As they both rose to comfort their daughter, Robert felt a sense of completion he had never known before. His life had taken an unexpected turn, from lonely millionaire to father and perhaps, someday, partner again. Success had once meant corner offices and business deals. Now it meant birthday parties and bedtime stories, science projects and dance recitals. Family dinners and quiet moments on the porch. As he put his arm around Anaya's shoulders and felt Priya's presence beside him, Robert knew with absolute certainty that he had finally found what true wealth really meant.